Good morning. Good morning, good morning. How are you? Oh no, I'm not going to get in your way, but I will go now. Oh, well, 8:30 and it's dark, isn't it? Probably doesn't look dark to you because you've got a nice 300 megapixel colour coordinated multi-F camera. It's very dark and grey. Just a quick addendum to Friday's podcast on Bitcoin. There's been a few more developments. They've started futures trading in America yesterday on Bitcoins on the CBOE exchange, and on the 18th or the 17th they're going to start trading on the CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is a much larger exchange. And the futures contract is basically just a bet that a commodity is going to be worth a certain price in the future, and people use it to underwrite the risk of owning a commodity. So for example, if you've got a lot of something, pork bellies, and you're worried that the price of pork bellies might go down, then what you do is you sell a few and you buy a contract that pays out if the price of pork bellies goes down. So if the price of pork bellies does go down, then you lose money on the pork bellies you own, but you gain money on the contract. On the other hand, if the price of pork bellies goes up, then your contract is useless, but you've got a warehouse full of pork bellies that have gone up in price. So either way, it's a win-win thing. So they use it to hedge risk, which means just eliminate risk from owning pork bellies. And the same goes with Bitcoin. People have been crying out to short Bitcoin because everyone is telling them it's in a bubble. So they want futures contracts so that they can bet that Bitcoin's going to go down and make a ton of money. But in fact, it hasn't worked out like that. It started trading at 11 o'clock last night, and in fact the futures market is up for Bitcoin. Trading January, I think, is trading about 18,600. At the time of making this podcast, it's about 16,000. So there was a bit of it. The price got a bit depressed last week because everyone was worried that the big boys are going to come in with billions of pounds and short the hell out of Bitcoin, selling cheap Bitcoin futures, and no one would want to buy a Bitcoin because you could always buy a cheap Bitcoin futures contract. But in practice, so far that hasn't happened, and in fact the opposite has happened. People are going long. The 18,600 doesn't represent a bet that Bitcoin is going to go up, because if you think Bitcoin's going to go up, your best bet really would be to just buy Bitcoin and hold it, and then obviously it will go up. A futures contract is a good way to leverage. If you haven't got many Bitcoin and you want to sort of try and take a massive risk on expanding your holding, you can lever up 10 to 1 or something and make a bet that Bitcoin's going to be at a certain price in the future. But the trouble is, it's not as easy as just saying it's going to go up. I think everybody thinks it's going to go up. You have to bet against someone who doesn't think it's going to go up as much, or thinks it's going to go up more. So you have to be more clever at guessing the price than they are, and then you make money off of them. Or because these guys are professionals, almost certainly they make money off of you. So I wouldn't suggest doing leveraged Bitcoin futures at the moment. But the point is that all the guesses for the end of January are around 18,600. So that's where some people are going, will say right higher than that, 19,000, and others will say less than that, 18,200, and they'll agree on the bet or the futures contract. But the point is that both of them are guessing higher. Both of them are about 2,000 up on the current price. So that's good, because a futures contract does really allow you to see into the future. It allows you, at least it allows you to sort of bring the wisdom of the crowds to bear on guessing the future. So you get a good idea of where most people think the future of Bitcoin lies, and at the moment it's positive. If it was 12,000 or 14,000, then obviously that would be bearish for the market, but it's being 18,600 against 16,000 is very bullish for Bitcoin, so that's good. So because there was a lot of depression and people moving their assets out of Bitcoin because they thought that the bottom was going to fall out because of the futures trading starting, and everybody, you know, saying it's in a bubble and wanting to short it, etc., etc. All that money's coming back in. So the Bitcoin price is going up. It went down to about 13,000 briefly, and then hovered around 14, 15. It's now back above 16. I think it's gone over up $3,000 in the last 24 hours. So you know, confidence has returned to the market. I'm very, very happy with that. Let's put my lights on. I think that would be sensible. So anyway, that sort of concludes the Bitcoin thing. Everyone's talking about Bitcoin at the moment. It's all over the news. If you listen to the BBC they do something on their nightly news every night. It's in the Guardian. It's a Telegraph have gone crazy over Bitcoin. That's not to mention all the internal. You know, there's a lot of Bitcoin websites now, that CoinDesk and places like that give you news. So it's you know, it's a big deal. It's the very, very beginnings of the separation of money and state. In the same way as religion is separated from the state, where money is getting now separated from the state. And that's not to say that you won't need money. I mean, you'll need money to pay tax. The state is probably only going to accept state money in payment of state taxes. But you are free to use any money you like. You don't have to use state money. If there's something else that's sort of pretty reliable and holds its value, or is deflationary as Bitcoin is, in other words, it's got a fixed supply and a variable demand. So you can imagine what anything with a fixed supply and a variable demand will be very volatile. It's going to go up or down a lot. And if demand is increasing and supply is absolutely invariable, then the price is going to go up a lot. And I've got a feeling. I mean, my price prediction for the end of this year was $2,000, and I made that in January when Bitcoin was at $1,000, and I didn't. And I said $2,000 this year and $5,000 at the end of next year, because I figured it was just counting sort of doubling or tripling every year. I thought, that'll be pretty damn ambitious price target. And it looks like we might finish the year somewhere north of 16, 17, possibly $20,000. So that means it's gone up 20 times this year. And it's gone up, it's certainly, I think by the end of the year it will have doubled since the 1st of December. 1st of December it was 9,000 and it's now 16, so we're on course for doubling. I mean, it's only the 11th of December, so it's gone up from 9 to 16 in 11 days. So, you can't, I know people say that, Bitcoin advocates are mad and they go on about stupid multiples, but what do we think Bitcoin's going to do next year? Okay, it's gone up from 1,000 to 16,000 December the 11th. Obviously I've had to raise my target of 2,000 at the end of the year somewhat, but if I'd known that in January that when Bitcoin had just gone through 1,000 and it sort of rocketed through 1,000, because I remember it was $700, and then you blinked and you missed 800 and 900. All of a sudden it was 1,000, and that was itself was a 30% increase. And we were like, what? What? It's just gone straight through 1,000 for January the 1st, and now it's just about to go through 20,000 for January the 1st, 2018. So what is likely? When something is low, it doesn't cost much. And I know, it's what I was saying, the Bitcoin is $20,000. I mean, old angry, you can't say that's not costing much, that's a lot. But don't remember, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin, okay? You can buy £100 worth of Bitcoin. That's not a problem. That's a common misconception. It's not a share, okay? It's not a share in Microsoft, or Buffett's Hathaway. What's it called? Berkshire Hathaway. You don't have to buy a whole one. You can just buy £5 worth. I wouldn't recommend you buy £5 worth because the transaction fees would wipe out whatever you bought. But you can buy £500 worth. So, but the reason why people buy penny stocks is because if a penny stock goes up a penny, that's 100% return on your investment. So that's why people like penny stocks. The trouble is that penny stocks are penny stocks because they are not, there's nothing backing them up. They just happen to still exist. They're like a ghost of a former stock where all the intellectual property was transferred out or something, and it's and there's just a shell company left. And so there's sort of this attitude that you want to buy stuff that's cheap because in percentage terms it will go up. So if you want your portfolio to go up 30%, you might be better off by buying a load of cheap stuff, because cheap stuff can go up more percent. Whereas if you buy something that's sort of pretty well fairly priced and costs a lot, then that's not going to go up 30%. You only get this meteoric percentage rise. But having said that, I mean, if you own one Bitcoin, just one Bitcoin, it's gone up in the last 24 hours $3,000, right? So how many penny stocks would you have to own one of? I mean, you have to own 300,000 different penny stocks that went up 30%, wouldn't you? To get the same amount of money. And that's when you're reading your PhD in a day or whatever it is, MSc in finance book, to teach yourself a PhD. What is the financial qualification that everybody says that you've got to get? I forget anyway. I haven't got it. Pam Swains has got it. She did it at Open University, I think. It's some sort of qualification anyway. I mean, what they'll say to you, look, what you're after is money, right? This is what you're trying to get, money. So don't tell me that your stocks went up X%. What I want to know is, at the end of the day, how much money did you make? Yeah. So one Bitcoin going up $3,000 in a day may not be much of a percentage increase, but it's a lot of money, which is what you want. Okay, so you're better off, I think, owning a small amount of something that's going to go up quite a lot, make quite a lot of money, rather than try and invest in a ton of little tiny things, hoping that they'll grow when they either stay the same or die. I've got a couple of things that I bought at $2.98, and then they went up to $3.56, and then the next time you look, they're $2.56. And you're like, well, I'm just glad I didn't buy too many of them. Anyway, so that's it. So it's all looking bright for Bitcoin futures. There was a thing called the Bitcoin Investment Trust, where you could buy, you could put your money in if you're an accredited investor in the United States, and they would buy Bitcoin for you, and then you had to hold it for 12 months. You couldn't sell your shares for 12 months. And that traded at a massive premium over the Bitcoin price, 10-20% most of the time. And that was a sign that things were bullish in Bitcoin. Because that price reflected what people thought the price of Bitcoin was going to be in a year. But even they were massively wrong, weren't they? So anyway, I'm going to come to my prediction for Bitcoin. My prediction for Bitcoin at the end of next year is going to be $100,000. Okay, that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going for, my gut feeling is 10 times the current price over the next 3 years. So that would put it at 200,000. But I'm always on the low side. You know, we've gone up 20 times this year. I don't know whether we can go up 20 times next year. I mean, if we could, then I won't be making these podcasts. This will turn from a dental podcast into a Bitcoin podcast. That's all I can say. But if it goes up 20 times next year, then the Bitcoin will be worth about 400,000. So, and if it even makes 100,000, I think that's the point at which most people will. How can I put it? You know, people say, "Oh, why don't you sell them? Why don't you sell them?" You know, you've got X amount in Bitcoins. Why don't you sell them? And I just don't understand that. I think it's a product of the old mentality. You know, it's like, say, going up to someone who's got like £1 million in the bank and saying, "You've got £1 million in the bank. Why don't you sell it? Why don't you sell it? I mean, sell it for what? Sell it for what? I mean, you don't sell currency, do you? You exchange it. I know the Americans treat it as a commodity. I tend to treat it more as a jewel. The first in a new type of asset, which is both a commodity and a currency. But I don't think of it as selling it. Selling it is a sort of the old share-based mentality, isn't it? Where I bought a share, I got it really cheap, and now it's gone up a lot. I ought to sell it. I ought to realise the gain. Crystallise the gain. Why? Because I can't guarantee it'll stay this high. It's riding a wave. It's in a bubble. I need to realise. I need to change it into something else. And with Bitcoin, it's not like that. You're not. This is, as I said in the last podcast. This is a long addendum to a podcast, isn't it? This is a new currency that's trying to find its need. It's trying to find its level. It's trying to find out what a fair exchange rate is for a currency that two people can use to transfer value. Anywhere in the world, any time, at little or no cost, without any corporate or government interference. A currency that gives you financial privacy and financial security. And a deflationary currency, and I can't overemphasise that enough. The fixed supply is even with gold, you might say, well, okay, a lot of people say, buy gold. Gold maintains your purchasing power. For 5,000 years, it's acted as a store of value and protected people against governments that overprinted their money. And that's true. For 5,000 years, it has. And then, that's because for 5,000 years, people didn't have Bitcoin. So. Believe me, Bitcoin is far better at doing what gold used to do than gold is. Gold is not very good. It's very difficult to take gold across borders. It's not very divisible. It's not easily tested. It might have tungsten inside it. You can't. It can be counterfeited. And it's not much use, it's not very liquid. I know you can say, well, yeah, gold is very liquid. And if you're looking at it from the trading floor of the London Bullion Market Association, then I suppose it is very liquid. But if you're in Puerto Rico and what you really need is a generator, some fuel, some water, some food, some shelter and some cigarettes, and what you've got is a couple of gold coins, I don't know whether you're going to get those for gold, How liquid is it in after a hurricane? So, but with gold, just to make one last point with gold, if the price of gold goes up, then a lot of old mines get reopened, and gold that was previously not economically profitable to mine gets mined. If the price of Bitcoin goes up, that doesn't happen. There is no hello. There's no chance that some old Bitcoin mines are going to get opened up. There's absolutely an elastic supply. So inelastic supply meets elastic demand is going to be one of the great macroeconomic experiments of your lifetime, if you're a young person, and the rest of my lifetime, because I'm an old person. I'm not going to live long enough to enjoy it. Anyway, nice to talk to you. See you tomorrow. Bye.